Hi there, CJ Jenkins. I am here at Lake of the Pines in Auburn, California, and I welcome you to today's Lake of the Pines Living Facebook. Now, when people move here, they have the classic set of questions, and one of the big questions is CJ, what can I plant here? What plants survive at Lake of the Pines? So today's topic is gardening at Lake of the Pines. Actually part one, because I have a couple of other shows that I'd like to do about flowers at Lake of the Pines. Today we're going to look at the hardy, steadfast plants that you can put in your yard. Now the biggest challenge for us is not the heat. We've got a hot spell going on in lots of places at different times. It's not the rain in the winter time. It is the deer. Yes, those little guys or big guys love to eat many of our plants. So you will not have a rose garden at Lake of the Pines, for example. The only way you'll have a rose garden is if your roses are in pots on your deck, or if you have a gated area like a little courtyard, you can plant your roses. So we are a community more of colored shrubs. And so today we're going to look at the shrubs I happen to have in my yard that could be something that you could put on your list for when you go to Home Depot or Green Acres to get plants for your yard. So let us start off with some of the steadfast samples here. This is an oleander bush, or we call it the highway bush, right? Because we see these along the highway. They are hardy and they are actually poisonous. So you never want to get a stick from here and put a hot dog on it and roast your hot dog if you were out camping and there were oleanders there, because they are poisonous. They are also very happy burners in a sense that they're really something we're not doing a lot of planting of today because they are very flammable, but they really do fill in a space. Now our next one that we have, and I have bigger versions of this, is that this is a rosemary bush right here. And how you can tell is just rub your fingers on it and it will smell like rosemary. Now the other plant that is also quite flammable and was planted at the beginning of Lake of the Pines is juniper. And we see people getting rid of juniper all the time. And I'm just putting it in here not to promote the planting of juniper, but also because it is very flammable. But it is, you will see it in many of our homes, that the juniper was a way for people to actually put some greenery in their new homes at Lake of the Pines in the 70s and 80s. Now remember, this was a community that was more of a vacation community. The people were retired who were living here originally, and this is a very low maintenance plant here to take care of. Okay, so we're going to go up the hill. Now this hillside right here once was being shaded by a gorgeous, humongous oak tree. And our oaks only last so long. So when our tree went down, to our surprise, and everybody in the neighborhood surprised when they heard the big boom 2 years ago, we needed to landscape our hill. You can see the rock outcroppings that are natural rocks that are on the hillside. And people forget when they come from the Bay Area, they think they're going to plant something wherever they want to. But you really have to be aware of the topography. And if you do have rock outcroppings near the front of your house, you may have them underneath the dirt too and not be able to plant a plant exactly where you want to. So this is a pine. It's always going to be green and dainty. It's called an M-O-G-O, a mogo pine. And it's very cute and very healthy looking. Then we have this pine tree right here. And I believe because it looks like a little candlestick, this is called a candlestick pine. And these will grow quite a bit taller. They're very full and dense. And I think they're kind of a cool shape. So now we're going to pass a tree here. You can see the fencing around this tree. This is a tree that isn't deer resistant. Now the 4 plants that I just mentioned, the azalea, the oleander, the juniper, the mogo pine, and the candlestick pine are deer resistant. And that's really what we're looking for. This is a dogwood right here, and we have some wire around it until it gets established so the deer do not nibble on it. Now you can see our creative little scare tactics here. We have a plastic snake on this, this protected wire here to keep the deer away in a very nice, peaceful way. Just warning them, this could be a real snake. Guys, you might think it's a real snake. So just keep away from eating my dogwood. So up the hill, we have another deer-resistant plant. This is called a grevillea. And if you touch it, it's very pokey. Ouch. And it has little thorns on the stems right here. So you can see that this is something the deer would not want to eat. This grevillea has small flowers in it when the flowers come out in a kind of pinky red, which is quite pretty. And it is a pretty piece to cut strands of this and put them in your flower arrangements because they add a lot of nice green foliage. So we have a couple of other trees that we've planted that we are protecting at the base. This is a flowering cherry. It doesn't provide fruit, it just flowers at certain times of year. We have another flowering tree. I think this is a flowering pear, and then another flowering plum, I believe. Now these cedars that you're seeing are ones that, as you can see at the base, it's not as full at the base right here because when we planted this tree, it was in August 2 years ago. That's a bad time to be planting anything in August. But our big oak tree went down in the middle of July, and we had to landscape this area before the wedding that we had at our house in September. So we did not, it wasn't the optimum time to do the planting. And I kind of call this a Christmas-shaped tree, and I think it's called Green Goddess. There's a healthier version of the Green Goddess tree there, and that one has grown, probably about 4 feet since it was planted 2 years ago. So it's doing okay. So we're going to get off the hillside here. Oh, and here's a cute little baby Nandina. This is called Heavenly Bamboo or Nandina, and they can grow very tall. I've got a tall one to show you in a little bit. So let's go down the driveway. Oh, and by the way, this gravel at the side of our property here is a nice little touch because it is actually a great spot for people to have additional parking spaces. You also have less yard that way. We don't really need to have the yard come all the way to the street, especially for being water efficient, but it's nice to have some extra parking. Now, most of our natural trees here are oaks. We are called Lake of the Pines, but we should really be called Lake of the Oaks. Oaks grow at our elevation, which is 1,500 elevation, and pine trees are usually growing at 1,700 to 2,000 elevation, where they do much better. So this is a crepe myrtle tree, which we planted ourselves, and they come in many different colors: lavender, white, shades of pink, and this is kind of a magenta, and it's a nice bit of color for the yard for us. And the tree next to it, the bush next to it, which is quite large, is actually a holly bush that the original owners planted here probably 30-something years ago. Here are azaleas, and the azaleas that do really well. Our bush here needs to have a little trimming here. You can see we've got some dry area here, but this is a broad-leaf azalea. The azaleas always come out at Lake of the Pines. I always look for them around Mother's Day in May. And they're pretty. You can have whites and lavenders and pinks and reds, and you can have a lot of color in your yard during Mother's Day weekend. This is a St. John's wort, and the deer don't eat this also. It's a little dry. St. John's wort could also be a ground cover. This is in a bush form. Now we do have Japanese maples, and that adds a lot of color to your yard. You can have them in red, you can have them in lime green, and the different shades of green. So that is a nice little touch of color. Again, we see a holly bush here. This is a smaller variation of a holly bush. The leaves are small, and it's a small plant. Now, why the deer don't eat a holly bush? Well, it's all pokey. Makes sense. But it's nice to have the holly here to decorate for Christmas time. So here is a big grevillea bush, and you have to keep these trimmed. This one's ready for a trim right now. This is to keep them tidy, and you don't want them to get too leggy with too many big, big branches. Okay, so right back here is a silver leaf bush. We put this brick wall in years ago to bring our vegetation up higher. It was a big project. It looks like it's been here forever, which is the plan. But this silver leaf bush right here was really a great way to create a lot of privacy between us and our neighbor next door. Now the issue here at Lake of the Pines is we don't have fences. We don't fence our yards because the deer roam. And we can have a dog fence or garden fence, as I've mentioned before. People have a feeling that if I have a fence that's up this high, then I have all this privacy, but you still can see houses above that fence. It's just a psychological thing. A lot of our fencing that I consider as my fencing is in plants. And you can plant them and be patient and wait for them to grow up the way we did with this silver leaf right here. And here is humongous Nandina, or heavenly bamboo. It's taller than me. It's truly ready for a trim, but it is a nice plant that's always green throughout the year. So this is one of my favorites. Oh, by the way, we paved our driveway a few years ago, and we did a good neighbor path between our sweet neighbors next door and us. Now between them, we have this plant, and this plant here started in 5-gallon containers, I don't know, 6 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. And we used to have cypress that grew here, the big tall Italian cypress pointy trees. And cypresses usually last for about 30 years before they bite the dust. So we felt very exposed with our neighbor. So we did our research, and this is waxy obelia. Waxy obelia. And once this is trimmed, which it's really ready to be trimmed, and we will have just a whole wall here of this hedge, and it's very pretty. Does bring in a lot of bees, usually in the morning. They keep to themselves and love these little blossoms that are here. So this is one of my favorite plants, and I call it a Lake of the Pines fence of sorts. So all these plants, except for the few that had the metal around, are all deer resistant. Now we're going into the dog run. So if you have a dog run, one of the things, you don't even have to worry about closing the gate because we don't have a doggy here right now, but one of the things that's nice about having a dog run is that all your plants that are growing in the dog run are not being consumed by deer. So we have a couple of grasses here and ferns. Now what does really well here in the foothills is wisteria. And we have wisteria that has established themselves in a very strong trunk area here. In fact, the reason why we do have the fence around this wisteria is not because of deer. We just have a very active yellow lab who would like to act like this is a stick that they should be chewing. And so we are actually protecting our wisteria with this fence around here because this is her dog run. Another Japanese maple. This one has some little blossoms on it. A very pretty green Japanese maple. So here is the ground cover of St. John's wort. You can see that this particular plant is in a lot more shade than the other one that didn't look like it was doing as well. And this is a very peaceful setting here. And this is another pokey plant right here that the deer do not like. It is called Barbera. Barbera is really cool because it's so maroon. It gives your yard some color against the green, and it's just lovely. But it's very pokey. It has thorns in it, and the deer do not like it. And I like taking some strands of it again, minus the thorns, and putting this pretty red in flower arrangements. Looks really quite nice. Now this is a different kind of Barbera, which is a petite one. We used to have a super big one here, and what happened is it got so big, it actually blocked our view of the lake. So I really don't want to look at a Barbera bush. I'd rather look at the lake. So we took it out and we found a petite Barbera that actually has a different coloration on it that isn't going to grow really tall. Again, another Barbera plant, a little variation of the other two in coloration. And Nandina right here, or heavenly bamboo. So the deer roam right past these plants regularly. Drives my dog crazy because she likes to bark at them. And she can't get them because she's behind the dog run. So this is a gorgeous maple that we enjoy having in our yard. Now, a lot of you may not know this, but deer do not eat lavender. So here are some lavender plants. They're past their prime in their purple blossoms. Now they're quite dry. Oh, but they smell lovely. There are 11 different kinds of lavender plants that grow in Nevada County that the deer do not eat. So if you wanted to do some flowers, you could maybe mix up your different kinds of plants that you have. And here's a different style of lavender. Now these plants are growing in the shade. So you have to think about where you're going to place your plants. Sometimes people will say, well, I want a little more privacy in my backyard, and there's 2 pine trees right there. And in between those 2 pine trees is a whole lot of shade. And the shade is so important here. And then someone says, well, I'm going to plant a hedge right in between these 2 pine trees. Well, if you have a lot of shade, that might not be the place for you to be planting those plants. Now let me tell you what's happened over and over again. People want to plant certain things and they don't do their research, or they get a little tag and the tag says deer resistant on the tag when they go to the nursery. Well, that's great, but sometimes the deer don't read the tag. And they said, oh, I spent $300 on these plants and I planted them and within a week they're gone. So you really have to look around the community. Use your neighbors as your help and drive by in your golf cart or take a walk and maybe take some samples of some of the plants that are out in the open for the deer to eat. And then you will know that that would be a plant that you could plant in your yard. I don't want you to spend the $300 and not just the money. It's the effort and the disappointment for you here. So if you look over here right by our fishing hut, you can see the different colors of shrubs that we have. So a lot of our plantings are mostly different colored shrubs. And in another session, we will look at some of the flowers that you can actually plant at Lake of the Pines that survive the deer, and the deer are not interested in devouring them. So we're just going to do a little segue right now, and we're going to hop into the garden because it's time for all the veggies to be growing. And we're going to go into my garden and look at what we're growing here seasonally at Lake of the Pines. However, there's a gate around and a fence around the garden. So you know that these are not deer-resistant plants. They are the garden plants that we all love to eat, and we don't want to share the vegetables with the deer. So let's head over to the garden. So this garden is approved by the association. The ECC has approved this garden. And here we have a very yellow, not ready to pick yet, cucumber. This is an English cucumber, and we planted the other kinds of cucumbers. And I think in future I will just stick with the English ones. They have less seeds, and they have I think a better taste. Okay, so here we have our cherry tomatoes, and we do have mesh to keep them up and keep them off the ground. I'm not a big cherry tomato fan, oops, but when you grow your own, they have a completely different taste. And you may know this already, but do not put your tomatoes or your tomatoes in the refrigerator because it makes your skin very hard. So always store them outside the fridge. Oh, that's really good. So we have some more cherry tomatoes here. And what's different about these is their color. They're kind of maroonish with green streaks because these are heirloom tomatoes. And that's the difference in them. Here's another one. You can see it looking very maroonish. And it has a different flavor than the others. Now we planted snow peas this year. They did not do very well. They just kind of burned up. This is the snow pea right here that's just didn't get enough water. So that we'll say, there we go, dear. You can eat that snow pea. We have another cucumber plant. And the trick with your cucumbers is you don't want them to get really big, because if they get big, then they are no longer tasty. They lose their flavor. And then next, oops, look at me. I'm stepping on a cucumber. So I think this guy needs to go back inside the garden right here for right now. Then we have the regular, stay put, okay, regular sized tomatoes. And when your tomato starts to split, like this one splitting at the side, It's time to pick it. Tells you that it isn't getting enough water. And so make sure you do pick them when they're that way. Okay, so backing up. The story of the sunflowers. This is a big sunflower plant, and we made a mistake this year. We waited a while to get our seeds. So when we went to Green Acres to buy our packages of seeds for our garden, all the big, the famous yellow sunflower, big stalk seeds were all gone. So we only had a few choices, and this was a mixed bag of sunflower seeds. So we see the small sunflowers there, the big sunflowers here, and the maroon sunflowers there. Now, we've always planted our sunflowers against the outside of our garden. And our neighbors next door, since the sunflowers always face them and they do not face us, are thrilled about getting them. But then we had this weird thing happen. We had some seeds. We did not plant the sunflower plant right here. We did not plant that sunflower plant right there. That would be a silly place to put your sunflower, especially next to the other vegetables. I think some little birds or maybe some squirrels got in here and started redesigning the garden for us. Because this is my Jack and the Beanstalk right here. And you would never plant a sunflower on the edge of the garden like this. This is humongous. And there is a benefit for this particular plant to be planted next to the railing so it has some support. But obviously it is strong enough to hold that big, look at this blossom here. It's crazy. Just gorgeous. But not exactly where we wanted them to be. But that's gardening for you. So what do we have here? I'm going to pull one out. Maybe I can't get one out here. But, okay, well, just trust me. I'll tell you what they are. These are potatoes. Okay, so people say, I can go to the store and get a bag, 5 pounds potatoes, not a big deal. Oh my goodness. You know how people say that tomatoes taste so much better homegrown? Potatoes taste so much better homegrown. It is amazing the flavor that comes out of these potatoes, no matter how big they are. So we have a different variety of potatoes here. And we actually started them from original potatoes. So we started from those cuttings, but they are absolutely delicious. Our lettuce did not do very well this year, so we're not mentioning the lettuce. And here we have our green beans. They're kind of messy in a garden, and they're kind of messy to pick, but here are green beans. Cute little necklace, huh? I could wear this. Okay, so I guess it's time for me to come in here and do some picking for dinner tonight because we do have plenty of green beans. Look at these. Ready for a little stir fry. Oh my goodness. They're going to taste so much better than the ones you get in the store. Look at them. Plenty of them. Yikes. Well, you can see I haven't been in the garden for a couple of days. And that's the duty that you have when you do have a garden. Bob is the planter and I'm the picker. And you have to come in every so many days to make sure that if there's something really ready to be picked, that it gets picked at the right time. And that's sometimes the shortcoming of planting gardens because there's a lot of maintenance to them. And a lot of that maintenance is picking them. You can see I already have one good serving of green beans, so I need to get out here. So that's about where we are. We are at Lake of the Pines right now doing our first show on gardening, mostly shrubs, as we've mentioned. And if you have any questions about any of these particular plants, just give me a call, CJ, at 530-906-4715. And I'd be very happy to share some of this information or repronounce one of the words that I've just said in the video quickly, clarify something for you. I'll also probably connect you up with the best gardener at my house, and that's Bob Jenkins, my sweet husband. He does put a lot of love into our garden. So give me a call or reach out to me at Lake of the Pines Living Facebook, or call me at on my cell, and I'd be very happy to share any of this garden information that you might want and be able to use here in your house when you live at Lake of the Pines or you live in the Sierra foothills. These plants will survive the deer, which is our biggest job here at Lake of the Pines. We love the deer, but it's nice to also have some gardening going on here. So thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.